You're listening.
You're listening.
You're listening to the Agency Podcast.
Hello and welcome to 12 Minutes. I'm Michael Colling-Tuck.
And I'm Keith Jackson.
This week we're going to be talking about new market entry and land and expand strategy.
Landing successfully. First wins matter.
Creating proof points of fuel expansion.
And scaling across the market.
Hello Keith, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Yes. Good to see you.
Always good to see you too. We call this podcast 12 minutes because our research tells us that that's the average amount of time that a supplier has for a healthcare professional interaction in the modern world. On average, a healthcare professional working in a hospital uses around 50 devices per week and over 30 pharmaceutical drugs. That is a lot of suppliers competing for their attention. This podcast is about how sales and marketing teams can better align to use that 12 minutes most effectively. Good week, Keith?
Yeah, pretty good. Busy as ever.
Fantastic. Good. And a bit of international travel lately, I hear.
Yes, most recently to Japan. I was there for almost 4 weeks.
Just a quick reminder to everyone, you've exported to how many countries?
Oh, more than 70.
Fantastic.
Including Japan.
Over a 30-year period now?
35 now. 35 years, more than 70 countries. Yeah, so that's on average, I guess, 2 a year.
Good. Well, I mean, I've been doing this for around 20 years. So I guess that's over half a century of experience on this podcast. That's what people get to learn from.
Let's do that and see if we can share some helpful insights for the audience.
Okay, let's kick off. So landing successfully, first wins matter. What's your thoughts on an initial entry strategy to a market? Let's say we've decided the market. We've decided our partner and our strategy for our partner, whether that's an agent, distribution partner, or we're going in direct. What's our first steps to gaining a foothold in that market?
I suppose there's a number of factors at play about the size and the complexity of the market. I think you actually have to be quite targeted. Otherwise, you could burn a lot of resource trying to be busy but not productive. So I think actually maybe thinking about segmenting that market, maybe then thinking about, well, who are the opinion leaders? That could be one approach. Which are the target hospitals or target centres? Is there a particular region that's high value or has easier access, or actually maybe your partner has better relationships? So yeah, that's sort of, I think you've got to set out by throwing a six to start in a more targeted way rather than a scattergun.
Okay, great. Like that. So let's dig into that then. So you're saying to sit down and work with your partner to understand that those areas that might be more easy to target than others, or more fit better with our ideal customer profile of what we're looking for.
Yeah, go find the more fertile soil first. And that might actually be not so much which is the prestigious hospital or which is the great KOL. It might be, well, what relationships does the partner already have that they can leverage and build upon?
Fine. I like that. So in my head, I'm looking at probably doing a scoring system and coming up with a number of prospects, maybe from a bit of outbound activity where we approach some VIPs that we might want to work with that we've decided, but also looking at what the sales force have had come back in. I like lead scoring as I'm a marketeer, and I'd probably want to set up a criteria and decide who probably represents the best fit for our ideal customer profile. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, no, I think that's a sensible approach. I think having a bit of a process rather than gut feel, I guess, is probably the fundamental thing here. So the organisation will have to decide what's the right criteria for us and how much weighting do we want to give each of those scores. And do we use those scores as absolute or as a guidance? Perhaps it's a way of informing, well, what are the top 5 places we ought to try and go, rather than let's start with number 1 and then work to number 2. It might be a bit more broad brush than that, but I think, yeah, certainly need some sort of process to work out where your focus sits.
Okay, and a bit of a loaded question here. How important is that first center that you pick up to use within that market entry, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's more important how you execute and how successful you are than whether you chose the perfect one or the slightly less perfect one. I think that's less important. So I think, a few quick wins is good for a number of reasons. 1, credibility. 2, you've actually got a foothold you can then build from. You've actually got some evidence, some use case that you can talk about with other potential clients. And actually, importantly, and often overlooked, confidence for the organization, but also for your partner. There's some interest in this product and it's we're actually starting to get some traction. So yeah, I think start where there's the greatest opportunity of success is not a bad tactic.
The other thing I'm thinking here is learnings. So how we talk a bit about healthcare is not healthcare in every country. The systems aren't the same. there are logistical processes, there are clinical pathways that are different. How would you utilize those initial wins to align your value proposition?
Yeah, I think we might have touched on this previously, but I think it's important that in anything you do, including new market entry, you have a plan, do, review, and act. So those early learnings, a bit like launching a new product, the very first bits of feedback you get are gold dust. So the same should be true if you're going into a new market. What are customers? Why did they choose it? If they've selected your product, why did they not choose it? If actually they're sitting on the fence or they've said no, a firm no. And for those that have started to use your product, what do they like? What's not quite as they expected? There's lots of learning you can get from those early cases and those early centres. So it's really valuable, and it's really valuable you actually take time to reflect and you have an honest conversation with your partner, because they might see it through a different lens than you.
The way I think about it is your reasons for use in one country might not be the same as in another, because the market can be different, the competitors can be different, and also the previous experience of that market could be different.
Yeah, and preferences and priorities might be have different biases. So I think that feedback does help you to sort of rethink your value proposition in a local terms. So what are the local clinical needs? What are the local challenges? What are the poorly met needs? How are those poorly served needs? What other products are already using? Because it will be different. It will be quite contextual. So I think, yeah, early learning, and then maybe help that to refine rather than completely rewrite, refine your value proposition for that market.
I think for me, everything centers from the value proposition, because each market could have a different value proposition, slightly adjusted, right? It doesn't have to be completely different, but there has to be that. And then from that, we can then start putting together some sort of a narrative. So interesting way around here. I want to be clear about it. We've talked about going out to find maybe some centers to start working with, clinicians to start working with, potentially. And then I've got on my list here, third on my list is then do the value proposition as number 2. And then thirdly, then it's about the training and education. And that could start with the sales force, but also the wider HCP community. And I think what I want to point out here is, if you've got that small test sample case, you've got, as you said, experience and confidence to know that your product has a place in this market, a good product market fit, in my words. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you've got to, I think support's probably the optimum word here. It's not about telling anybody what they need to do or how they need to go about it, because that's why you've got a local agent. But what you can do is support them. And it's not just, importantly, and this is where a lot of businesses fall short, it's not just about the product. It's also about how the product's used. So applications, maybe some contraindications as well, maybe some tips and tricks so that the surgeons can sort of benefit from other people's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years of experience in other markets. But I think, yeah, that sort of training and education, as you say, it's the sales team and it's the clinical community, but I think it's much more than the product. So I think, yeah, just raise your sights and think about all the other things that are part of that solution beyond the product. And I think that, as I say, that's even in the UK, that's something that often is overlooked. And we all get excited about the product and all its benefits and its features and the technical detail. So what? It's actually what it does. It's what it does that's important, and the way that people use products and on which group of patients and how they go about that, and the pressures and the demands and all that might be different in different markets.
I mean, that tension you described between the local partner and your way of doing things is often a complex relationship to manage as well, right? They have the expertise for their market, but you have the expertise for your product. And I think there has to be a really tight eye from the manufacturer to the sales force, and constant sharing of information. I've seen that go wrong a few times, and no one wants products being used in contraindicated criteria. So okay, creating proof points to fuel expansion. Let's talk about capturing early clinical outcomes and testimonials. How important is this, and why is it important to do this locally? You've got loads of evidence from your country, right?
Yeah, you have, but it doesn't always translate, does it? Because the confidence and trust that the HCPs are looking for in market are, well, who else is using this product here? Yeah. I mean, you even see that in the UK, don't you? People often say, if they're not the very early adopters, they'll say, well, who else is using this? What do the results look like? What issues have you seen? What constraints might there be? What opportunities are there to improve my practice? And they tend to put more bias on those that they know and particularly those that are similar to them. So, the UK is a great example of that. There are lots of examples of that. Go to a completely different market, different culture, never mind different clinical practices or slightly different clinical practices. I think it's really important you've got some local evidence and you've also got some local references. So that's why those early cases are all important. Those first wins, it's not just about starting to get some traction with sales. It's also about finding the people who are going to be those advocates in market, because you won't get very far without them.
It's kind of part of your approach strategy, right? In some ways to them to say, look, we're going to look after you by collecting these early clinical results and having a responsible market entry that is founded in strong ethical roots. And, you can really use that real world success that you learn from that to strengthen your market positioning, because that can differentiate you from some of the other competition out there who might not be keeping as careful eye on monitoring those early results.
And I think also maybe there's another facet of that, which is, best practice isn't static. So by monitoring and showing that you're genuinely interested in those early adopters and you're looking after them and you're supporting them and you're genuinely interested in the outcomes they're achieving, there's a bit of ego massaging, to be honest. But also it's really insightful, as you say, and that best practice, you can then help others, not just to onboard them so they start using product, but actually to get a really good result. So yeah, I think there's a number of ways in which capturing those early results in market, getting people to testify that the product works well in their hands rather than somebody 1,000 miles away, that their patients are benefiting in the same way that we would expect. All of those things, really, really important. But yeah, I think if you don't, what a missed opportunity, because that is gold dust. That local evidence is gold dust.
You're building the brand with peer validation, right? And that's what's going to build your own momentum. And gathering a small community of people who say this is a really good idea is the perfect place to scale from.
Yeah, it feels real to those people because, as I say, it's in their market. It's with their type of patients, with the types of presentation, and that might be, it's the same condition, but it's presented earlier, later, very late. So actually, the pathology that they're used to seeing might be a bit different in some markets. And so it feels very real. So yeah, I think that's a very tangible, credible evidence that helps build trust and confidence, is a great way to then build out from those early centers and those early adopters.
Well, building community is sometimes done in a smart way by bringing those users over to your country to see your best advocates who might exist in your home countries or potentially in other countries too, and then potentially sometimes showing them the manufacturing plant, which enables them to see hopefully excellence and best practice in of the product and why it took off in the first place in a certain area of the world. What was your thinking on that?
You can build a lot of trust that way, can't you? And also, importantly, you can't get away from making those people feel special. They've taken a leap of faith to an extent. Your product might have been around for quite a while with some really great results in Europe, but let's say you're going to the Far East. That might not mean that much. Supporting and partnering with your KOLs in market, seeing them, and it may be combined with a conference that they might be attending anyway or speaking at. And as I say, the physical evidence, seeing is believing. The physical evidence, this is how we make the product. These are the people who make it. This is something else we've got in development. We're really interested in your thoughts. It's all about making that person feel special. And then, of course, not surprisingly, you're going to, or more often than not, going to be an advocate for not just your product, but for your company.
Well, I mean, that leap of faith you described is a really good phrase, because that leap of faith is them putting their entire trust in your brand for potentially a significant number of their patients.
And of course, it's protected time, isn't it? So if somebody's away from their clinic, away from their hospital, and you've got their captive attention for a few days, then there's a lot of time to build a relationship, as well as business discussions socially as well.
And peer validation from clinicians who might
Introduce
have
them
been
to
using you for a
peers.
decade.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, isn't that something, I'm sure you found this, Mike, isn't that something that's really highly prized in any market you operate in? Helping clinicians to form connections with their peers in other markets, because it's fairly straightforward to do it in market. You go to a conference, you go to an annual convention, and you'll meet your peers and may well have trained with many of them. But actually, overseas, it's quite a bit harder to do. So if you can facilitate that, that's a real value add to your KOLs in home market, as well as your new KOLs in the new market.
Who are your best salespeople?
Yeah.
They're not the ones you pay. the ones who put in your products or received your products.
Absolutely.
To create a community of them and allow them to do the advocacy and the promotion work themselves between them. It's far more powerful than anything that we can do. Okay, scaling across the market then. So we've got our foothold, we've got our base, we've got maybe 10 users, maybe across 2 or 3 centers. How can we better showcase that work to the rest of that territory?
Well, I think, again, like many things, it's sort of a phased approach. You can't go from A to Z in one go. So I think part of that evolution, as you start to build some traction, is there comes a point where you don't want to pay business class air tickets to fly a clinician from halfway around the world to go and visit another clinician. Or the converse, which is take a KOL from your home market on a roadshow and do the same in market. You can do that, and you will probably continue to do some of that. But, there comes a point where you think, well, actually, we really need some in-market centers of excellence, some in-market KOLs who could be product advocates. And I think that's important. You start to build not just toeholds, but footholds in market by maybe recognizing. So there's some recognition in this, recognizing the people who did take that leap of faith early doors, who did start to use this product in earnest in large groups of patients, and actually give them a bit of status, and we've probably done this in many markets, particularly home markets, but actually if it's a new market, what better way of getting stickiness with a hospital or a clinic and the KOLs within it by recognize them as a center of excellence. Wow. And we're going to bring not just KOLs from our home market who already know the product, but actually potentially some new KOLs from the next market we're going to enter. And we're going to bring them to you because it's a 2-hour plane flight, not an 8-hour plane flight, for example. So yeah, centers of excellence, local centers of excellence have many, many aspects to brand building in market, but also helping you with your further endeavors in other markets.
Love a center of excellence. Who doesn't love best practice?
Yeah.
And real world evidence attained from that center and potentially published. It's great. Becomes a beacon. And, again, lots of criteria. Just locate them in a capital city, ideally, or not in a large city with a large airport, good transport links. Please don't leave it 4 hours away from the airport.
No.
I hated it. Like to do that.
And be careful who you select for your centers of excellence. It doesn't mean that you might not have traction in a very capable hospital that's got very good results and a good reputation. But actually, to then put that forward as a center of excellence, you just need to be careful how you do that and who you choose for lots of reasons, not just geography, but actually, whether the KOLs they have a following, whether they're respected, whether the hospital has a reputation, maybe for other specialties, but has a reputation. So yeah, I think the similar principles that you might apply in home market do also carry over to other markets. Context and the nuances are very different, and you do need your partner support to work that out. Don't try and do it on your own, because it's not just about how you perceive these people's reputation, the hospital or the clinician. It's also about how they are perceived by their peers, importantly. And it might be hard to decipher that if you one, don't speak the language, and two, are not native with the culture.
Score your KOLs as well, to me. Absolutely, put them together. Explain to them, this is why we picked one over the other, because we thought that was what we were looking for, and you weren't quite there. I know that sounds a bizarre concept, but it's much easier to do that and explain to someone why they've not been selected than it is, we just felt this person was better. Score it.
This is objective. Yes. Yeah.
I think it's about that. Okay, last point, because we're running out of time, is localizing campaigns and marketing materials. Obviously, this is an important one in my world. I absolutely staunch, in my view, please don't enter a market and not produce local materials. I mean, it shows that if you're committed to that market, then you need to be, by very least, translating them. Please put a new value proposition in place first, because then you'll understand whether there are any discrepancies in what you might be promoting in your existing materials to what you want to promote over there. But to me, that's a given. I saw your recent social post about this, and I really liked it as well.
Oh, yes. So I think I would go a couple of steps further. So I think absolutely you need to have local marketing content and materials. Of course you do. No, I don't think anybody would refute that. I think it's quite a bit more than just translating it into a local language, particularly in high context cultures, because although the language might be correct, technically correct, does it actually convey the same message in the way that audience is used to receiving the message? And that's always the important part of communication, is it's not what we say, it's how somebody else interprets what we've said. Yeah. So I think in many markets, actually, I was about to say some, many markets, you almost need to go right back. And I think you touched on it there, Mike. Go right back to your value proposition and sort of build up your marketing materials from the base with that local context. So it's all about, it might be about layout, it might be about presentation, it might be like language, it might be about lots of text, not much text. It might be the images you choose. Yeah. So a patient sort of walking along the beach in Brighton, who is very Anglo-Saxon, might not say very much to an audience in Japan, for example. So why not just change the image for a Japanese patient walking along the beach? Simple, really. So yeah, you've got to localize, but I think it's much more than just translating your copy into that language. Much more.
And I think it's absolutely perfect. And also channel, right? In the UK, lots of doctors use certain channels to receive their information. WhatsApp is a big one over here.
But WhatsApp's not available in every country.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly that, right?
Widely used in some countries, yeah.
Look, the key one to me is meet your people where they are. Don't assume that their people are going to be where they are in your home nation, and that's how they'll communicate. So think about that. And that's a good thing to work with your partner on.
It is. I think, yeah, it's a bit like, don't advertise in the newspaper if none of your potential customers read the newspaper. It's quite simple, really, isn't it? But I think also, I'm just going a step further. It's not only you're missing an opportunity, it's actually could be interpreted as being disrespectful. So if you just say, well, we've already got loads of really great marketing content, everybody understands English, especially in a professional sphere, i.e. clinicians. Here's our wonderful brochures and our explainer videos, etc., etc., etc. It shows a bit of a lack of respect that you haven't bothered to translate that, to interpret that, to present that differently for that market. It's almost like you're not really serious about the market. And in this day and age, you don't need to have all the printing costs. You just do it digitally, make it digitally available. And actually, many people don't want the printed copy. Yeah.
One of the world's largest banks, HSBC, has a whole campaign about localization and culture.
Yeah.
There you go. Listen to the people that really know. Good. I think we're out of time. I think we've even gone over.
Yeah, there we go.
That's how tough it is to hit 12 minutes in a conversation about new market entry. It's great. Enjoyed it.
Likewise.
Be seeing you
always
again
a pleasure.
today for another one. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay.
Stay
well,
well.
till the next time. Stay well.